Tanungan na naman ang ating sasagutin ngayong linggo. Ikaw ba ay nabiktima na ng mapanlinlang na gawain na may kinalaman sa pagbebenta? Samahan niyo kami at ating sagutin ang liham mula kay Ginoong Anderson. Dear Consumer Care, bumili ako ng 3 bote ng Appleton Estate 12-year rare Jamaican rum sa isang online platform. Ngunit mababang klase ng alak ang i-deliver sa akin ng seller. Hindi ito ang alak na aking in-order at binayaran. Hindi rin tinanggap ang request kong i-return ang produkto at mag-refund na lamang. Ano po ang dapat kong gawin? At para sagutin ang katanungan ni Ginoong Anderson, kasama natin ngayon si Ms. Verlene Reyes Lim ng Consumer Policy and Advocacy Bureau. Magandang araw po, Ms. Verlene.
Magandang araw sa iyo, Dens, at sa ating mga consumers na patuloy na nakasubaybay sa Dear Consumer Care.
Ms. Verl, ano po bang masasabi niyo sa kwento ni Mr. Anderson?
Naku, Dens, ayon sa salaysay ni Ginoong Anderson, masasabi ko na may paglabag ang seller sa Article 50 o Deceptive Sales Act sa Consumer Act of the Philippines. Ayon sa batas na ito, ang Deceptive Sales Acts and Practices o ang tinatawag nating mapagdinlang na gawain ng isang seller or supplier ay labag sa batas kahit nito ay nangyari bago, habang o pagkatapos ng isang transaksyon.
Maaari niyo po bang ipaliwanag sa amin kung ano ang deceptive o mapanlinlang na gawain?
Itinuturing na mapanlinlang ang isang gawain kapag ang producer, tagagawa, supplier, o nagbebenta ay naghihikayat sa isang mamimili na pumasok sa isang transaksyon sa pagbebenta o pag-ubukto maling representasyon o mapanlinlang na pagmamanipula. Sa kaso ni Ginoong Anderson, ang representasyon ng seller na ang kanyang binibenta sa platform ay Appleton Estate 12-year rare Jamaican rum, subalit hindi naman pala ay matuturing na isang Deceptive Sales Act.
Para po sa sitwasyon ni Ginoong Anderson, ano po kaya ang maaari niyang gawin?
Sa mga ganitong pagkakataon, ang mamimili o consumer ay maaaring tumangging tanggapin ang produkto at maaaring kansilahin ang kontrata. Kung sakaling ang produkto ay natanggap na, maaaring ibalik ang mga ito at bawiin o refund ang ibinayad ng consumer.
Paano naman po kung ayaw magbigay ng refund ng seller at kung ayaw tanggapin ang pagbalik ng produkto?
Maaaring mag-file ng complaint o i-report lamang sa DTI Provincial or Regional Office sa inyong lugar o mag-email sa Fair Trade Enforcement Bureau. Ang proseso ng pag-file ng complaint ay makikita rin sa DTI website or www.dti.gov.ph.
Kaya mga consumer, siguraduhin na tama ang binibiling produkto. Tingnan ng reviews bago bumili, lalo sa mga online platform, at bumili lamang sa mga mapagkakatiwalaan na tindahan. Para naman sa ating mga seller, tandaan na labag sa batas ang mapanlinlang na gawain o pagbebenta. Maraming salamat, Ms. Verl. At yan ang kabuuan ng ating programa sa araw na ito. Paalala lamang po ng impormasyon na aming naibigay ay base lamang sa aming natanggap na salaysay at mga pangyayari na inilahad ni Ginoong Anderson. Abangan muli ang Dear Consumer Care sa susunod na linggo. Ito po si Denzel Bonal na nagsasabing, wais ang consumer na may alam. Para sa updates, please like, follow, subscribe to our Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube accounts. That's DTI Consumer Care and DTI Philippines.
Ang tunay na pangalan ng mga tao, lugar at organisasyon sa liham na tampok sa palabas na ito ay pinalitan at pinago. Ang anumang pagkakahawig ng mga bagong pangalan sa aktwal na tao, lugar o organisasyon ay hindi sinasadya at nagkataon lamang.
Magandang araw mga consumer. Sabi nila, biyaya ang bawat taon.
Recording in progress.
Happy Tuesday po to all our participants, sa mga nakatutok po sa atin dito sa Zoom, and to everyone joining us live via DTI Consumer Care Facebook and DTI Philippines YouTube. Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. You can still invite your friends and colleagues to join this webinar. Para po sa ating bagong participants, ang programa pong ito ay inilunsad ng DTI Consumer Policy and Advocacy Bureau upang makapagbigay ng kaalaman tungkol sa mga napapanahong topics na makakatulong sa atin para tayo ay maging wais, mapanuri at malayang mamimili. I am Diana Mejia from the Consumer Policy and Advocacy Bureau, and I will be your moderator for today's webinar. Manatili lamang pong nakatutok sa ating Consumer Care webinar series tuwing Martes sa DTI Consumer Care Facebook page para sa iba pang detalye at mga announcement. Pero bago po tayo magsimula, we would like to give some reminders. Unang-una po, ang ating webinar session ay recorded. By continuing your participation in the meeting, you are also consenting that you may be recorded. We are encouraging you to stay at samahan po ninyo kami hanggang matapos at sabay-sabay tayong matuto sa topic natin ngayong umaga. Ang mga sumusunod po na reminders ay para masiguro na smooth ang ating webinar session. Una, pakipalitan po ang format ng inyong pangalan. Maaring consumer, space full name, o di po kaya pangalan ng company, then your complete name. Kung masyadong mahaba naman po ang pangalan ng company, kahit acronym na lamang po ang gamitin. Please turn off your mic during the webinar session unless you are requested by the moderator to speak. Para naman po sa mga katanungan, we are encouraging everyone to click the raise hand button to directly address the speakers during the Q&A portion, or you may send in your question through the chat box. And last, para po sa mga naka-touchscreen device, please avoid drawing or making annotations on the screen para hindi po natin ma-distract ang ating speakers at iba pang mga participants. Without further ado, let us begin the webinar session by singing the Philippine National Anthem to be followed by the invocation.
Mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas. Kayang magiliw, elas ng sinakalan, alam ng puso, sa titik mo'y buhay, lupang
Loving Heavenly Father, we come to you this hour asking for your blessing as we are gathered together in this webinar. May your blessings of wisdom and guidance be upon us all through the sharing and impartation of knowledge and skills by our resource speakers, facilitators, and moderators. Bless also the participants so that they would be able to glean the information from this activity and share what we have learned in the spirit of your generosity. Lord, we bring you our prayers, our commitment, our gifts to you this day. Let us, who have a keen dedication and awareness of your creation, have courage and conviction that we are able to contribute to the sustainability of the earth. Inspire us as we make choices so that we will recognize the impact our lives have on our environment and our human family around the globe. Pour out your blessing upon us today, Lord. May each of our actions reveal our awareness that we are partners with you in the creation and sustainability of this earth that you have given to us to appreciate and enjoy. We ask this in the name of your Son. Amen.
Good morning po ulit sa lahat ng ating participants na nakatutok dito sa Zoom, Facebook at YouTube live stream. Muli nais po naming imbitahan ang lahat na mag-subscribe sa DTI 1384 text messaging upang makatanggap po tayo ng updates at kaganapan mula sa DTI Consumer Protection Group. Tandaan, wais ang consumer na may alam. And now, for our 221st webinar session this morning, our topic is all about corporate recovery and tax incentives for enterprises, or the CREATE Act. To formally start our session for today, we would like to call the officer in charge of Consumer Advocacy Division, Ms. Vivienne O. Alarcado. Good morning po, Ms. Bien.
Thank you. Thank you, Diana, and good morning, everyone. As mentioned po, welcome to our 221st Consumer Care Webinar Series, and our discussion for today will dwell on the Corporate Recovery and Tax Incentives for Enterprises Act, or the Republic Act number 11534, which was crafted to amend several provisions in the outdated tax code. This is to primarily reduce corporate income tax rates and simplify fiscal incentives for domestic and foreign investment. This act also provides fiscal relief to domestic and foreign corporations engaging in businesses. Our invited speaker will further discuss this during the presentation. So on behalf of our directors, Attorney Marcos Verdes and Attorney Cheryl Carbonell, I would like to thank our participants and our speaker, Attorney Brandon Berad, the Assistant Chief of the Legal Management Division of the National Tax Research Center, for giving time to this webinar. Again, good morning and thank you.
Thank you po, Ms. Bien. To echo Ms. Bien, we are very fortunate to have with us our speaker from the Department of Finance Fiscal Incentive Review Board. Our speaker for this morning, he finished his bachelor's degree at St. Louis University, thereafter his Juris Doctor degree at San Beda University College of Law, Manila in 2019, and took the bar examination in the same year. As a member of the FIRB's legal group, He assists in the proper implementation of the CREATE Act and its implementing rules and regulations, ensuring that the FIRB grants the appropriate tax incentives to business enterprises, among others. Prior to joining the FIRB Secretariat, he was employed as a junior associate in the law office of Ocampo Uy Santos Tayag and the Naganan or Locos laws, and handled cases involving corporate taxation, criminal, and procurement law. Currently, he is the Assistant Chief of the Legal Management Division of the Fiscal Incentives Review Board or the FIRB. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome Attorney Brandon Berat. Good morning po, Attorney Brandon. The floor is now yours.
Hello, good morning po. Happy Tuesday po sa ating lahat. Let me just share my screen po. So, kita po ba?
Clear naman, sir.
So, let's start po. Again, good morning po sa ating lahat. And first of all, thank you for inviting me dito sa Consumer Care webinar. Along with me also pala is our chief sa Legal Management Division of the National Tax Research Center, Attorney Michael Ricasa. So let's start po. Good morning. During this presentation po, I will be discussing an overview of the CREATE Act and its implementing rules and regulations. So we will learn on the amendments of the CREATE Act sa tax code natin. So the discussion, the outline of the discussion will be as follows. First, we'll discuss the policies and objective of the CREATE Act. The next one is the fiscal incentives rationalization. So what enterprises are entitled, what projects are entitled to fiscal incentives, what fiscal incentives may be granted to enterprises, who grants and administers fiscal incentives. Next is the process and registration for the grant of incentives. And next is the tax incentives management and transparency. And of course, the transitory provisions of the CREATE Act. So let's start po. The policy and objective of the CREATE Act or the Republic Act 11534 is actually aimed to develop the national economy by improving, of course, global competitiveness and tax policies, instrumental in attracting investments, both foreign and local. So from these investments, the aim of the government is to enhance the productivity, generate employment, and promote countrywide development. So through this, through this policy, it is aimed to be achieved through the following objectives. First is, of course, the improvement of the corporate income tax. So one of the major changes brought about by the CREATE Act was the decrease of the corporate income tax. Dati, the corporate income tax was at 30%, but because of the CREATE Act, it was lowered to 25%. And even as low as 20% if the enterprise will be classified as a medium, small, micro, small, medium enterprise. So there is a 5 to 10% drop from the previous 30%. So malaki na po siya. So the effect of which, mas malaki na po ang mauuwi na income ng enterprise and mas madami na siyang may invest para sa sarili niya and para sa employees niya. So next is the next objective of the CREATE Act is the provision of support to businesses in the recovery of unforeseen events. So the CREATE Act is two-pronged, no? So one is the fiscal rationalization, and another part of the CREATE Act is the providing support to businesses affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. And of course, it also prepares the businesses to be prepared for future events that may also adversely affect its operation. And of course, last objective is last two objectives are the development of a globally competitive tax incentives regime, which is of course performance-based, targeted, time-bound, and transparent. It also provides for a more equitable tax incentive system. So the CREATE Act rationalized the incentives available or incentives that may be granted to enterprises. So performance-based and targeted because incentives may only be granted to preferred activities or those uh, which are the target priorities of the government. So hindi lahat ng enterprises or hindi lahat ng projects or activities mabibigyan ng tax incentives. Only those which are considered by the national government as a priority or a preferred project. So next, when did the CREATE Act take effect? So tax reform has always been pushed during the past Congresses. No? It was only during 2021 through the CREATE Act, which tax reform was fully realized. Of course, CREATE Act was a part of the comprehensive tax reform package. Package 1 being the train law. Package 2 na po ito, the CREATE Act, which again amended a lot of provisions in the tax code, specifically the corporate income tax, and also in addition, nagdagdag pa siya ng bagong title regarding fiscal incentives. So shortly after, the government also passed implementing rules and regulation of the CREATE Act during last 26 June of 2021. And it was also amended on December 3, 2021. So the implementing rules and regulation of the CREATE Act was designed to fill in the gaps and also implement the provisions of the CREATE, especially those as regards fiscal incentive. So again, the CREATE Act introduced a generous and flexible tax incentive system that is, again, performance-based, time-bound, targeted, and transparent. So ito kasing objective ng CREATE. No? So the rationalization of the fiscal incentives aims to update and simplify the previous incentives tax system, which was complex and resulted in a lot of tax leakages. So this will improve the tax efficiency and administration of the government. So we see sa slide from the chart, we see that prior to the CREATE, the Philippines was actually very generous in granting tax incentives. So incentives were even granted in perpetuity. So forever yung incentives na binibigay dati prior to the CREATE. So this was also without regular review of the costs and benefits in granting tax incentives. So the lowest in the ASEAN region is Cambodia, and the highest, aside from Philippines, before the CREATE was Singapore. So now, because of the CREATE, we see na-fix na ito ng CREATE by adding Title 13 of the tax code. So Title 13 now provides, Title 13 of the tax code now provides for a standard list of incentives that may be granted, the process of registration, the conditions to avail such incentives, the commitments that must be achieved by the enterprises, and other administrative matters relative to the grant of tax incentives. So we see here, even if nabawasan nga yung tax incentives from the previous incentives na binibigay to enterprises, we are still globally competitive, and we are still at par with Singapore, which is again one of the highest countries providing tax incentives. So we see here in the chart also, meron tayong nakikita number under the CREATE Act. This is, however, only granted to projects or activities that are classified as highly desirable projects. Pero normally, we give as long as 23 years. So next slide. So dito po, what are the projects that are entitled to tax incentives? Sabi natin kanina, the CREATE Act is time-bound, performance-based, and targeted. So under Section 300 of the tax code, it states that only projects or activities listed in the Strategic Investment Priority Plan or the SIPP may be granted tax incentives. Under the SIPP, ito po yung list of projects or activities which are the targeted or the prioritized projects by the government. So dito sa SIPP, uh, meron siyang list, and what the government considers is the first, the location of the project. Number two, the industry with which the project is classified. And of course, enterprises are also classified into two, which are export-oriented or domestic market-oriented. So again, we take into consideration one, location of the project, two, the industry of the project, and number three, the classification of the enterprise, whether it's an export or whether it's a domestic market-oriented project. So dito, as regards location, the farther the project or the activity is located away from the national capital region, the longer period of incentives that it may be granted. So we take into consideration three areas. First is the national capital region. Second is areas adjoining the national capital region or other metropolitan areas. And of course, the third consideration is all other areas na hindi NCR or hindi metropolitan area or hindi adjacent to NCR. The 2020 SIPP, also approved by the President through Memorandum Circular 61, series of 2022, also takes into consideration the industry of the project. So the industry of the project is divided into three tiers. So tier 1 projects composed of preferred activities. These preferred activities is also based from 2020 Investment Priority Plan. Tier 1 project also covers export activities and activities under special laws. So again dito, the higher the tier, the longer the period of incentives that may be granted. So let's go back tier 2. Tier 2 covers activities engaged in green ecosystem, health-related activities, defense-related activities, industrial value chain gaps, food security-related activities, and lastly, tier 3 covers research and development, highly technical manufacturing and production of innovative and product services, and lastly, innovative support. So again, for projects and activities to be entitled to incentives, dapat listed siya under the SIPP. And the length of incentives will be dependent on the location of the project, the industry of the project, and the classification of the enterprise. So what now are the fiscal incentives that may be granted to enterprises? So before the CREATE Act, fiscal incentives being granted to business establishments were dependent on the special laws or charters being implemented by investment promotion agencies. Now, because of the CREATE Act, the fiscal incentives were streamlined to provide for a standard set of incentives that may be granted. So now, regardless of where an investment or regardless of where an enterprise registers with, kahit kaninong investment priority, kahit kaninong investment promotion agency siya mag-register, they will be, if allowed, they will be granted the same set of incentive. So the incentives, these are the incentives that may be granted under the CREATE Act. First is the income tax holiday. So this is just from the word itself, holiday siya, hindi ka magbabayad ng income taxes mo for 4 to 7 years from the start of commercial operation. So of course, this is related to the gestation period or the learning period of a project or activity. So the ITH is granted in order to encourage establishment of undertakings and enterprises considered necessary to the national interest. So 4 to 7 years, hindi ka po magbabayad ng corporate income tax. Magbibigyan ka po ba ng additional income tax or ITH? Yes po. Even after the ITH period, pwede ka mabigyan if you have a qualified expansion project. You will be given 3 years additional ITH. If you will locate in areas recovering from disaster, you will also be given 2 years additional ITH. And if you relocate from the NCR to other areas na apart from NCR, you will also be given additional 3 years of income tax holiday. So that's the first fiscal incentives under the CREATE Act. Next is the special corporate income tax or the STIT. So this is a tax in tax incentives regime. The SCIT will be equivalent to a tax rate of 5% based on the gross income earned in lieu of all national and local taxes. This is for 10 years and it will be availed of after the ITH period or after the first investment in after the first fiscal incentives na igagrant sa enterprise. So this will be for 10 years. Take note lang, this SCIT incentive is only available for export projects or activities. So again, this is the trust of the government to only provide incentives or to prioritize direct exporters. So yung 5% na gross income earned, maghahati-hati po siya. The 3% of the 5%, it will be directly remitted to the national government. And the 2%, the remaining 2%, it will be remitted to the local government unit wherein the project or activity is located. So again, also important to this is in lieu of all national and local taxes. So hindi ka na po pag nandito ka po sa incentives regime na ito, hindi mo na po kailangan magbayad ng ibang taxes kasi nandito na siya sa 5%. Covered na siya. Third fiscal incentive is the enhanced deduction. So this is available for domestic market enterprises and export enterprises. However, for domestic market enterprises, they will be provided up to 5 years of enhanced deductions or ED. However, for export enterprises, 10 years po ang ibibigay sa kanila. This is again after the ITH period. So we see as compared to the special corporate income tax, or similar to the special corporate income tax, the enhanced deduction is also after the ITH period. So one of the conditions as provided under the tax code, the STIT, if availed, cannot be hindi po sila pwedeng isabay with the enhanced deductions. So when you register with an investment promotion agency at export enterprise ka po, you will have to pick or you will have to choose whether after the income tax holiday, you will avail of either special corporate income tax or the enhanced deduction. So again, the enhanced deductions, these are deductions in addition to the allowable and ordinary necessary deductions under Section 34 A to J of the tax code. So this will lead to again higher gross income, mas mataas na po ang take home pay again that will be reinvested to the enterprise and to the community and to the employees of the enterprise. So this is actually a new incentive as introduced by the trade. So ano ba yung mga deductions na pwede? First is the depreciation allowance. This is a new deduction under the as introduced by the trade. So we have additional 10% for buildings, 20% for machinery and equipment. Next is labor expense deduction, research and development deduction, training expense deduction. Next is the domestic input expense deduction, power expense deduction, reinvestment deduction, and enhanced NOLCO. So those are the enhanced deductions. And next tax incentive is the customs duty exemption. So this is an exemption from the duty from payment of duties on importation of capital equipment, raw materials, spare parts, or accessories for 12 years if the enterprise is domestic, or 17 years if the enterprise is export-oriented. So this is from the date of registration unless otherwise extended from the SIPP. So remember po, under the customs duty exemption, remember 2 points. Number one, this is from the date of registration. So once you are registered in an investment promotion agency, kahit hindi ka pa po nagsastart ng commercial operations, pwede mo na pong gamitin itong customs duty exemption in order to import additional machineries without paying the customs duties or other capital equipment or materials necessary in the project or activity of an enterprise. Of course, only those the customs second point po, the customs duty exemption is only for imports directly and exclusively used for the registered activity of any enterprise. Next incentive is the value-added tax or VAT exemption on importation and value-added tax zero rating on local purchases. So the VAT exemption on importation and VAT zero rating on local purchases, as provided by the CREATE Act and its IRR, shall only apply to goods and services, again, directly and exclusively used in the registered project or activity of an export enterprise. So dito po, this is for a maximum of 17 years. And the export aid is only available to export enterprises. So take note po, again, the VAT exemption and VAT zero rating, we have the condition that it will only apply to goods and services directly and exclusively used, similar to the customs duty exemption. And under BIR, our Revenue Memorandum Circular, dinefine po nila kung ano yung directly and exclusively used phrase. So these are those which are directly attributable to the project or activity of an enterprise, and without which the registered project or activity cannot be carried out. So second point is it will only be available to export enterprise. So kung domestic market oriented enterprise ka po, hindi ka po mabibigyan ng VAT exemption on importation and VAT zero rating on local purchases incentive. However, the other incentives pwede ka po bigyan. So again, this is for a maximum of 17 years from the date of registration. Similar to customs duty incentive, this is from the date of registration, and kahit hindi ka pa nag-start ng commercial operations, pwede mo na pong i-avail itong incentive na ito. So to summarize, for export-oriented enterprises, again, sabi natin kanina, projects are based on the SIPP, and the SIPP considers what? The location and the industry tier of the project or activity. So the farther you are away from national capital region, the longer period of incentives and the more sophisticated or the higher tier of industry tier the project is, the longer the incentive. So let's take, for example, a project, export-oriented project. So tier 1 siya, located in national capital region. So this said project will be given 4 years of income tax holiday, and after which they will be given either 10 years of enhanced deduction or 10 years of SCIT. So ito po yung ED and SCIT, it depends on the choice po ng ng enterprise. However, if it is a project which is classified as a tier 3 project and it is located, sabihin natin, in Mindanao, so it will be provided 7 years ITH and plus 10 years enhanced deduction and for 10 years SCIT. So that is for export enterprises. For domestic market-oriented enterprises, again, the same po with same concept with the export enterprises. However, iba lang po ibibigay na incentives. Sabi natin kanina, domestic market enterprises hindi po binibigyan ng SCIT, and if binigyan po sila ng enhanced deduction, 5 years po. So let's see, for example, a domestic market enterprise. A project is located in the national capital region, and it is a tier 1 project, 4 years of income tax holiday, and 5 years of enhanced deduction po ang ibibigay. However, if the enterprise is located again from all other areas, not the national capital region or the metropolitan area, it will be provided 7 years income tax holiday and 5 years enhanced reduction. So this is also in addition to non-income tax incentives such as the customs duty exemption. So ito na po, we talked about the projects which are entitled to tax incentives, and we also talked about the fiscal incentives that may be granted. So if you're an enterprise and you want to avail of tax incentives, kanino ka pong government agency lalapit? So ito po, lalapit na po tayo sa investment promotion agencies and the Fiscal Incentives Review Board. So it's the IPAs and the FIRB. So prior to the CREATE Act, the incentives were granted only by investment promotion agencies. However, because of the CREATE Act and its amendment, the CREATE Act transferred the authority to grant tax incentive. It was transferred to the Fiscal Incentives Review Board. And a delegated authority is provided only to IPAs. So what are the IPAs in the Philippines? So currently we have 14. So these are the BOI, RBOI BARM, PEZA, BCDA, SBMA, CDC, JHMC, PPMC, CEZA, ZCEZA, PIA, APECO, AFAB, TIEZA. So yan po ang cover ng CREATE Act. And of course, we have the general provision states that all other existing similar authorities or all other IPAs that may be created by law. So if you want to register a business or an enterprise, you want to register its project or activity, you just go ahead and go to any of the IPAs listed here. As stated a while ago, sabi ko kanina na the authority to grant tax incentives was transferred to the Fiscal Incentives Review Board. The Fiscal Incentives Review Board now is an interagency government body. It is composed of 5 key officials from different. The board proper makes up of 5 key officials from different departments. So the Fiscal Incentives Board members is composed of the following: the Secretary of Finance as chairperson, the Secretary of Trade and Industry as co-chairperson, and the members of the board, the Executive Secretary, the Secretary of Budget and Management, and the NEDA Director. So sila po ang decision makers natin sa FIRB. The FIRB is also composed of the FIRB Technical Committee. So the Technical Committee serves as the main support unit of the FIRB, and it is composed of several key officers from different agencies. So these are composed of different undersecretaries and assistant secretaries of the stated departments. And lastly, the FIRB Secretariat, which is being or the National Tax Research Center rather, which serves as the FIRB Secretariat. So the Fiscal Incentives Review Board, because of the CREATE, had expanded its powers to include, among others, the following. So number 1, policy-making functions and oversight functions over the 14 IPAs, as stated a while ago. The authority to approve or disapprove the grant of tax incentives. So this authority originally, again, came from the IPAs. However, transferred to FIRB, and a delegated authority was granted only to IPAs. So the delegated authority po, IPAs may still, through the delegated authority, IPAs may still grant tax incentives. However, they may only grant tax incentives to projects or investments or activities which have an investment capital of 1 billion and below. So if the investment or if the capital involved is 1 billion and below, kahit yung IPA na po ang mag-grant or disapprove ng tax incentives. However, if the investment capital involved is more than 1 billion pesos, kailangan na po na FIRB ang mag-grant ito. So again, Fiscal Incentives Review Board, yung expanded powers niya involves power to cancel, suspend, or withdraw tax incentives granted, require entity and firm level in tax incentives data and benefits data, and submit it to the president. Next is the recommend incentives for highly desirable projects and promulgate rules and regulations necessary to implement the CREATE Act. Of course, we also have the general statement or general power that the FIRB may exercise all other necessary and incidental powers to attain the purposes of the CREATE Act. So ito, very important, take note po dito. Yung sabi ko kanina, the 1 billion threshold, ito na po siya. This is summarized in the table. If the amount of investment capital is above 1 billion, the granting authority should be the FIRB. If, however, the amount of investment capital is 1 billion and below, the granting authority or the power to grant the tax incentives has been delegated to the IPA. Take note always that yun lang po ay for the grant of tax incentives. However, for registration, if you want to register with an if you want to register your project, it is within the exclusive jurisdiction of an IPA, regardless of the amount of investment capital. So if you want to register your projects, hindi ka po lalapit sa FIRB. Lalapit ka po muna sa IPA of your choice. So the IPA, if it's above 1 billion, the IPA will, if it's above 1 billion, it will endorse it to the FIRB, and the FIRB will be the one to grant the tax incentive. So this is to summarize the fiscal incentives rationalization. So prior to the CREATE Act, we see that the approval of incentives was only within the power of the IPAs, but because of the CREATE Act, it is now with the IPA or the FIRB. Also, because of the CREATE Act, if it expanded the authority of the FIRB to have oversight powers over the IPAs and its registered business enterprises. Industries covered, now sabi natin kanina, all those projects which are under or listed in the SIPP. So previously, ITH was only 4 to 6 years. Now, because of the CREATE, it's 4 to 7 years. For expansion activities, because of the CREATE, 3 years na po ang dagdag na ITH, followed by enhanced deduction or SCIT, and of course, the applicable non-income incentives. Lastly, additional incentives for relocation outside NCR or in disaster conflict areas. Wala po ito prior to the CREATE Act. And because of the CREATE Act, again, one of the objectives is countrywide development. We want to encourage projects or activities to locate in areas further from the NCR. So if you relocate there, will be provided additional ITH for 3 years. And additional 2 years in areas recovering from disaster or conflict. So what is the process? So having an idea of the fiscal incentives that may be granted, the projects that may be entitled to tax incentives, and the government agencies involved in the grant of tax incentives. Paano ba yung process nito? So how do we register how does an enterprise register with an investment promotion agency? So normally, for preferred projects, this is the general process for application for registration and tax incentives. So first, we see here, the business enterprise, it applies for a certificate of registration with the relevant IPA through an online application online application system called the FIRBs, or the Fiscal Incentives Registration and Monitoring System. You can also apply manually with the IPA So when applying, bibigay nyo lang po yung required documents na hinihingi ng IPA, and the IPA on its in turn checks the list of pre-required documents and evaluates the application. So after checking, it will conduct an initial impact evaluation. And if it sees that the project has an investment capital of more than 1 billion, it will now endorse the same to the FIRB. The FIRB Secretariat will now review the application endorsed by the IPA and conduct an ex-ante cost-benefit analysis. And of course, it will prepare an independent evaluation report, and that report will be forwarded to the FIRB Technical Committee. The Technical Committee, in turn, either adopts or rejects the Secretariat's recommendation, and it submits the same to its recommendation to the FIRB Board proper. The Board proper now decides on the application and issues a board resolution. So itong board resolution, it's either the approval or the denial of the project. The board resolution will now be endorsed back to the IPA, and if endorsed, the IPA will now register the business enterprise. If denied, the IPA will just provide the business enterprise of a notice of denial. So that's for enterprises na more than 1 billion and above. However, if for investments 1 billion and below, the general process, after only the IPA conducts an initial impact evaluation, and the IPA board decides whether it will grant or deny the tax incentives or registration of a business enterprise. So hindi na po siya dadaan sa FIRB. So again, if approved, it will be registered with the IPA, and the certificate of registration will contain the list of incentives that are granted to the applicant. If denied, it will only be provided a notice of denial. So now we see another process, or the grant of tax incentives by the President for highly desirable projects. So we see, sabi ko kanina, there are instances where a project may be granted tax incentives for up to 40 years. So these are projects which are classified as highly desirable projects. And to be classified as such, it must meet two conditions. Number one is the project has a comprehensive sustainable development plan and a high level of sophistication and innovation. Number two, it has a minimum investment capital of 50 billion pesos, or its equivalent in US dollars, or a minimum of direct local employment of at least 10,000 within 3 years from the issuance of registration. So if the project is qualified as a highly desirable project, the general process of registration is as follows. Again, first, the RBE applies for a certificate of registration, or applies for tax incentives with an IPA. The IPA in turn checks or pre-evaluates the application, checks if the documents are complete, and prepares an evaluation report. The evaluation report again will be passed to the FIRB Secretariat, and the FIRB Secretariat will conduct a CBA and evaluation report. Dadaan po ulit tayo sa FIRB Technical Committee and FIRB Board proper. The FIRB Board proper also now reviews and decides on the recommendation. So it will issue a board resolution either approving or denying. The decision, of course, will be forwarded now to the Office of the President, which reviews the endorsement of the FIRB and decides on the application. So dito po sa highly desirable projects, it is now the Office of the President which has the power to grant or decide on the application. So the decision will be transmitted back from the OP or the Office of the President to the FIRB to the IPA, and the IPA to the RBE. If approved, again, certificate of registration will be issued. If denied, a notice of denial. So one-stop shop action center, one of the aims of the CREATAC also is the establishment of one-stop shops or one-stop action centers in all IPAs. Ito po, the one-stop shop action centers are like a hub wherein enterprise may go to inside an IPA, and doon na po siya kukuha ng mga necessary documents, necessary government documents for the registration with an IPA. So you don't have to go to different areas to get various government documents. So because of the one-stop shop action centers, you can only you may just go to the Send Hub and apply for or request for the send or the required documents in one place. So next po, one of the aim of the CREATAC also is the promotion of fiscal accountability and transparency in the grant and management of tax incentives. This is to measure, of course, measure the government's fiscal exposure to tax grants. So these are needed in order to carefully examine or evaluate whether we see that we get our money's worth in granting tax incentives. So if you are a registered business enterprise, you will now be required to submit to the IPA and the FIRB an annual tax incentives report and an annual benefits report. Ito po yung atin and ABR. So these are passed within 30 days after the filing for tax return. So the ATIR and ABR contains the list of incentives being availed of by the RBEs and other such data requested by the FIRB. So ito po yung gagamitin ng FIRB in conducting its evaluation and report to the Office of the President. So ito po, the FIRB conducts within 6 months from the acceptance of the required submissions from the IPAs, OGAs, RBEs, and OREs, it will conduct annually an impact evaluation on the investment and non-investment incentives, and the results of which will be forwarded to the steering committee of the FIRB. So ito po, the results will be used as data in order to review the SIPP. So the SIPP po kasi may or may not be amended every 3 years. So it will depend on the data collected by the FIRB and submitted by the enterprises. So titignan natin if we need to adjust the SIPP. And of course, one of the purposes is the report to the President po. So what if an RBE or a project refuses to file its or submit its required reports or the ATIR or ABR? RBEs may be fined for its first violation for 100,000 pesos, second violation a fine of 500,000 pesos, and then for the third time, the RBE fails to comply with the repertorial requirements as provided or as required under the CREATE Act, its registration may be cancelled either by the FIRB or the concerned IPA. So if your registration na po is cancelled, you may no longer avail of any tax incentives that were previously granted to you. So for example, if you were at that time availing of income tax holiday and na-cancel ang registration mo po, hindi ka na po papayagan mag-avail ng income tax holiday. And even though subsequently provided na incentives. Of course, we also have to see now the transitory provision, the miscellaneous provisions of the CREATE Act. Of course, we have enterprises which were already enjoying tax incentives even prior to the CREATE Act. So the CREATE Act, sabi nga natin, merely updated the tax incentives regime. So the transitory rules for the CREATE Act is found in Section 311 of the CREATE Act. It states that RBEs are allowed to finish and continue the remaining income tax holiday period as stated as specified in the terms and conditions of the registration. So number one talks about RBEs merely provided with income tax holiday and nothing else. So the second is RBEs with ITH prior to the create and were entitled to the 5% gross income earned incentive after the ITH shall be allowed to continue the ITH as specified in the terms and conditions of the registration and then avail of the 5% tax incentive subject to the 10-year total for both incentives. So number three is RBE is currently availing of the 5% gross income earned incentive granted prior to the create tax shall be allowed to continue availing for the said incentive at the rate of 5% for 10 years. So we see at number 2 and 3, the second and third type of RBE, they will be allowed to continue their incentives for 10 years. So the 10 years po will be anchored on the date of effectivity of the CREATE Act, which is again April 2021. So they will be allowed to continue availing of their tax incentives until April 2031. So for example, illustration for Section 311A or the first type of RBE, yung ITH lang ang meron siya. So prior to the CREATE, meron siyang ITH for 6 years and not entitled to the 5% GIE or gross income earned incentive. The ITH started on January 1, 2020. It will then end on January 2026. And after January 2026, it will now be taxed as a regular corporation. So magiging under na siya ng the amended corporate income tax, which is either 20 or 25%, depending whether the enterprise is a MSME. So second type of RBE, meron siyang ITH period and meron siyang 5% GIE incentive. If, for example, again, ITH period for 6 years, it will be availed of from January 1, 2020. It will end on ITH period on January 2026. After January 1, 2026, pwede na niyang i-avail ang 5% GIE incentive up to the end of the 10-year period, which is now April 11, 2031. So after April 11, 2031, they will be now taxed as regular corporations. Same with the third type of RBE. If the period of incentive, if the incentive provided was only 5% tax on GIE, let's say it was given on January 1, 2020, it will be allowed to continue availing of the 5% tax on GIE incentive until April 11, 2031. So non-income related tax incentives, all RBEs will continue to avail of their existing tax incentives, may continue to avail of non-fiscal incentives in accordance with the transitory rules of the CREATE Act. So itutuloy lang po yung mga non-income tax incentives na binigay rin dati. Of course, as applicable and depende sa classification of the enterprise. So that's it po for the CREATE Act. That's an overview. That's a simple overview. I hope you learned something. And if you have any other questions for regarding the CREATE Act, the fiscal incentives, or any of the items discussed, just feel free to type it in the chat box and hopefully ma-kompleto nating masagutan during this open forum. So that's it for my presentation po, Ms. Diana. I return the floor to you. Thank you.
Thank you po again for that informative presentation, Attorney Brandon. Good morning po ulit sa ating mga participants here in Zoom and to everyone joining us via DTI Consumer Care Facebook and DTI Philippines YouTube. Before we proceed po with the question and answer portion, here are some reminders. Kindly stay muted po unless you are addressing the speaker or moderator directly. Please be also informed na makakapag-download po kayo ng copy ng presentation material after you accomplish the client satisfaction form or the CSF form. That will be posted in the chat box section. Para mas maging interactive po ang ating Q&A portion, we encourage everyone to click the raise hand button so we can call you to ask directly to our speaker. Pwede rin pong i-send ang inyong question sa chat box. We would like to welcome the presence of Attorney Michael Ricasa who will join us in the Q&A portion. Good morning po. Let us now open our question and answer portion. Ayan, habang wala pong nagre-raise hand, magbabasa po muna tayo ng question sa chat box. From Mr. Taban Ud, ang question niya po is, create law applicable to economic enterprises managed by local government units? Any answer po, Attorney?
Hello po. Good morning po. Thank you for the question po. The CREATE Act does not actually specify na bawal ang mga enterprises which are managed by local government units. Tama po ba? Local government. Ang problema lang po doon is for the admin matters kasi ang enterprise po kasi if registered will need to again submit a tier or an ABR to the IPA or ABR. So we have to look at the other administrative constraints kung sakaling LGU po ang magmamanage ng enterprise. However, again, hindi siya expressly prohibited under the CREATE. Yun nga lang, hindi lang siya talaga makaka-submit ng reports or other necessary documents needed by an IPA or an FIRB.
Thank you po, Attorney Brandon. We also acknowledge the presence of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas Director Charina De Vera Yap. Thank you po for joining us today. For our next question naman po, from Mr. Eric Dural. Is it correct to say that the SCIT is available only to exporters which are corporation? Is sole proprietorship are not qualified, Attorney?
Thank you for the question po. Under the CREATE Act, sino ulit po yung nagtanong? Si Mr. Eric Dural. Mr. Eric Dural is correct in stating that SCIT is available only to exporters because sabi natin kanina, the CREATE Act puts a premium pag direct exporter ka, mas madami or mas madaming available incentives as compared to domestic market enterprise. However, pag sole proprietors po and partnerships po, qualified rin po sila. So under section 293 of the tax code, the CREATE Act also defined what an export enterprise is, and this states that under section 293 states that it refers to any individual, partnership, corporation, or Philippine branch of foreign corporation or other entity organized under existing Philippine laws. So kasama po ang sole proprietors and partnerships na pwedeng basta ano sila they directly export their output or are considered as indirect exporters.
Thank you po, Attorney Brandon. Sana po nasagot po ng katanungan ni Mr. Dural. For our next question naman po, galing po kay Mr. Emilio Cabanizas. If VAT zero rate and VAT exempt on local purchase, is it automatic that the firm will be subjected to percentage tax?
So remember po, if an enterprise is provided the non-income tax incentive, which is the value-added tax or VAT exemption on importation and VAT zero rating on local. If the enterprise is provided po, wait lang, basahin ko ulit. If the VAT zero rate and VAT exemption on local purchase, is it automatic that the firm will be subjected to percentage tax?
Thank you po, attorney. Ayan, may... Ay, okay na po.
Hindi pa po.
Please continue, sir.
Check ko lang, baka nalito kasi ako. If the VAT zero rate and VAT, ito po no, kay Mr. Emilio Cabanisas. If the VAT zero rate and VAT exempt on local purchase, is it automatic that the firm will be subjected to percentage tax? So we have to consider that if you will be given VAT zero rating and VAT exemption on local purchases, it is parang implied na you are an export enterprise. Kasi sabi natin kanina, an export enterprise, the VAT exemptions are only provided to exporters. So we also have to see the possibility na baka naka-special corporate income tax siya. So if the special corporate income tax, the 5% is in lieu of all national and local taxes, which also covers the percentage tax. However, if hindi siya nag-avail ng special corporate income tax, they may be subject to percentage tax. So, yun po. So, yun po. So, can I call my the Chief of Legal Management Division, Attorney Michael Casa, if he has something to add regarding this question?
Yes, good morning.
Good morning po, attorney.
Yes, thank you, Attorney Brandon. Regarding the question, tama naman po yun, no? If you're under SCIP, so in lieu of all local and national taxes, so that includes percentage taxes, no? If you are, let's say, VAT exempt, under the tax code kasi, if you're VAT exempt and not VAT registered, and then if you meet the yung less than the 3 million peso threshold yung annual gross sales nyo, and then pasok doon sa subject to percentage tax yung mismong activity ninyo or yung revenue stream na yon, then you are you may be subjected to percentage tax. So it does not it does not mean once VAT zero rated ka or VAT exempt ka, automatically subjected na agad, no? So you have to you also have to look at the provisions ng tax code kung applicable sa iyo yung percentage tax. Thank you.
Thank you po, Attorney Ricasa. For our next question naman po, in addition po sa previous question, from Mr. Eric Dural po again, does VAT zero rating on local purchases include business expenses such as business lunch or dinner, office supplies, for example, from national bookstore and similar expenses po?
Thank you po, Mr. Eric Dural, for the question. So, as regards VAT zero rating, and isama na rin natin ang customs duty exemption, the direct, both of which may condition sila na it must be imposed only on goods or services which are directly and exclusively used in the project or activity of an enterprise. So the phrase directly and exclusively used was defined by the BIR in its BIR Revenue Memorandum Circular number 24-2022, stating na itong direct and exclusive na phrase only refers to those which are directly attributable to the registered project and without which the registered project cannot be attained. So most likely the business lunches or dinners may not be covered by the exemptions. However, since this is a matter regarding the collection of and assessment of taxes, it may be more prudent to ask directly to the BIR kung kasama nga sila talaga. Pero most likely, hindi kasi hindi siya directly and exclusively used. Hindi siya kasama doon sa phrase niyo.
Thank you po, attorney, for your answer. May nag-raise hand po kanina. We would like to call Consumer RMDC Trading. Do you have question po, sir? Pwede po tayo mag-unmute and mag-share po ng cam or video po. Ayan, habang wala pong response si Consumer RMDC Trading, we will continue po sa question natin sa online. For our next question po, we have received comment po from Miss Tessie Ladanga. She said po na, whilst I am thankful for this briefing, it seems that Create was created for big business and not for MSMEs that the DTI is fully supporting. Sir, in related po sa comment ni Ms. Ladanga, can you enlighten the participants on the importance and effect of the Create to MSMEs? Paano po nakaka-benefit ang MSMEs under this law?
So one of the thrust talaga ng PRETAC is also the support to MSME. So we can see that from the pag-decrease pa nga lang ng corporate income tax. So previously, again, the corporate income tax was a 30%. So one of the highest among the ASEAN regions. So because of the CREATE Act, napababa na po siya to 25% if you're a regular corporation. And if you are considered as an MSME or micro, small, medium enterprise, matataksan ka na lang ng corporate income tax to 20% po. So also in addition, I think Attorney Michael Ricasa wants to add something.
Yes, thank you. Actually, I admit, if we look at the presentation, if you are, let's say, an MSME, parang nakaka-overwhelm, no? Pero the reality is that when you look at the law, hindi naman po natin dinidiscriminate against MSMEs. In fact, walang minimum capitalization requirement under CREATE, no? Parang walang minimum investment capital requirement for as long as pasok ka doon sa list of priority projects, yung tinatawag nating SIPP. Ang mangyayari po niyan, let's say you're an MSME, you verify with, let's say, an investment promotion agency kung ano po yung application or registration requirements nila. Kasi ang required lang naman po talaga sa law, merong impact evaluation method or let's say may cost-benefit analysis eh. So it's possible na yung mga investment promotion agency, let's say yung Board of Investments or let's say yung PEZA, if you wish to register with this investment promotion agencies, it's possible na meron po silang CBA or yung cost benefit analysis na tailored fit para sa ating mga MSMEs. But of course, itong mga CBA po na templates na to na posibleng meron yung mga IPAs po natin for MSMEs would have to be approved by the FIRB. So yun lang naman po ang importante. So even yung MSMEs, yung mga sole proprietorships, you can avail of the incentives under CREATE. So hindi po talaga tama na for big businesses lang po yung incentives natin. Thank you.
Thank you po, Attorney Ricasa. For our next question naman po from Consumer RMDC Trading, kami po bang mga small hardware kasali po ba sa fiscal incentives?
Thank you for the question po. We have to go back to the SIPP if we are looking if kung entitled ba sila sa incentives or kung pwede ba silang mag-grant ng incentives. So general, pag hardware store lang na most likely hindi siya priority project. However, if meron siyang activity na pwede ma-consider under the SIPP, pag meron pa siyang ibang ginagawa, yun siguro pwede pang consider as a preferred project or a preferred activity which can be now.
Camera and unmute po para po ma-share po natin yung concern po natin Here, kala attorney po.
Can I talk now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
You
po.
may po.
Okay. Good morning po. Good morning po. Ako po ay accountant, kaya naiintindihan ko yung mga discussion, ano. In fact, when you mentioned that create law likewise benefits small businesses like us, because from 30% it became 25%. And then ang sinabi nung sumasagot from your end, in fact, kayong MSME magiging 20% nga. Ang natatandaan ko, yes, it's now 25%, pero kung a certain level ang income, the income tax rates becomes lower. So the higher the income, the lower it becomes a 20% tax. Yun po ay tanda ko. Yun po ay tanda ko. So, it's just to answer yung sinabing the MSMEs benefit by the create law being 20% only on their income tax. Dahil maliliit lang ho kami, maliliit lang ang aming mga taxable income. No? That's one. Second, sorry, masyado akong pakialamera, no? But I see the chat, and there seems to be a disconnect between zero rating. Yung tanong yung bang mga business tax, yung mga kain ko, pwede bang considered zero rating yon? Mali. The zero rating is compared to VAT exempt. You are either zero rated VAT or you are VAT exempt. It does not there's a disconnect from the business expense, no? Pero yung nagtanong, yung pagkuha ng input tax sa mga expenses, sa lands, etc., pinapasahan tayo talaga ng value-added tax. I-record nyo lang yan na VAT input tax. Kasi madididak nyo yan sa VAT output tax. I am a practicing accountant and I have my own business. So I do this all the time. Hirap na hirap ako na paliitin yung 12% na value-added tax. Paano ko napapaliit yon? Pinagtsatsagaan ko na i-record ko yung mga resibo na natatanggap ko pag ako'y kumain sa labas, etc., na 12% input tax. So yun ang sagot dun sa nagtatanong na pwede bang isama ko yung aking lunch sa VAT? The answer is yes. It has nothing to do with zero rating. Zero rating is if you are a corporation, yung business mo, either you are a zero-rated VAT enterprise or you are a VAT exempt, which is yung mga exporters. Yun. Sorry, mga matanda na ako, so you will tolerate me for my being pakialamera.
Thank you po, Ms. Tessie, for sharing your comments and concerns po. Balik na po tayo sa mga questions po na na-receive po natin online. For our next question po, one of the most attractive point of create law is that the slashes the country's current corporate income tax. Paano po ito makakaapekto sa dapat ay nakukuha ng government from businesses in covering the cost of general government services, goods, and activities?
So first of all, I want to thank again Ms. Tessie kanina sa sinabi na. So we encourage everyone to, kung meron kayong hinanaing or violent reactions doon sa CREATAC, sabihan niya lang po kami, and ito po mga kinoconsider namin in providing for the rules and regulations in implementing the CREATAC. So again, the question is paano po nababalik, tama po ba, doon sa government? Kanina po ulit question niyo. Kanina question po ulit yung Ms. Diana.
From online consumer lang po, sir.
Pwedeng paki-ulit po yung question.
Repeat ko na lang po yung question, sir. One of the most attractive point of Create Law po is that it slashes the country's current corporate income tax. Paano po ito makakaapekto sa dapat ay nakukuha ng government from businesses in covering the cost of general government services, goods, and activities po?
Okay po. Thank you. So so we have to see the Create Act as a whole, not just so one part of which is the decrease of corporate income tax nga. However, syempre, the decrease of corporate income tax will now generate less revenue dapat pag titignan natin sa government. However, the decrease of corporate income tax again promotes more businesses or more corporations to pay the proper taxes as well as we have to look at the other parts of the Create Act, which is the fiscal incentives portion. So under the fiscal incentives portion, it is aimed to attract businesses or investors to put up domestic and export-oriented enterprises as well as to attract foreign investors na dito sila sa Pilipinas mag-invest. So because the investments are also time-bound, hindi na siya parang forever na binibigay sa mga enterprises. We give the incentives only to help initially the enterprises and to attract them. And after the incentives period, lahat ng enterprise if corporation at the 25 or 20% rate. So again, mahihila natin ang investors or ma-encourage natin ng businesses to put or ma-encourage natin ng mga tao to put up businesses because of the incentives. And after the incentives, if we get our money's worth through employment generation and other opportunities, tataksan na rin natin sila ng regular. So I hope this clears the question.
Thank you po, Attorney Brandon. May nag-raise hand po from DTI Region 8, Mr. Eric Doral. You may unmute po.
Hi, good morning po.
Morning po.
Hello po. Yung point to Ma'am Ladang's point po kanina, dagdagan ko lang. Kasi aware ko dun sa mga business expenses na merong mga input tax. Before the Create Law kasi pwede naman mag-claim yung mga exporters under Section 112 of the tax code. Actually, kasama sa mga input tax nila, yun yung sa mga business lunch, yung ibang hata kuryente, tubig, plus yung mga office supplies na yung iba-ibang mga suppliers, like for example, mga national bookstore, gano'n. I think under the train law, kasi may mga yung mga nasa mga PESA firms, for example, before zero rated yung nila purchases. Pero under the train law, tinanggal yon. So, it's an additional burden on them na mag-claim pa ng tax credit or tax refund and mabagal sa BIR na mag-claim. Kaya I'm assuming, nagkaroon ng zero rating on purchases para matanggal na yung need to apply for a VAT refund. Kaso kung ang curious ako yung practicality. Kasi kung halimbawa bibili ka from national bookstore na office supplies or kahit anong mga merchandise store dyan, anong i-represent mo sa mga yon para i-VAT zero rate nila? Kasi parang mahirap, imposible na magawa na halimbawa yung mga national bookstore, mga restaurant, mag-i-issue ng zero rated na resibo. Iyon po yung point ko din sa question, yung practicality. Salamat po.
So thank you, Mr. Eric Doral. So we have to remember that under the Create Trend, the fiscal incentives, enterprises were classified as number 1, export enterprises, number 2, domestic market enterprises. For domestic market enterprises nga po, wala na wala na rin siyang hindi na siya binibigyan ng VAT exemption or VAT zero rating incentive. So they will be now taxed at pwede na siyang mahatawan ng VAT. So the freight up also, one of the effects also was upon its effectivity, nawala na rin po kasi yung cross-border doctrine na sinasabi natin. So as regards VAT, lahat ng domestic corporations na ngayon, para na rin siyang regular corporation, pwedeng mapasahan ng VAT, and of course, as a regular corporation, pwede na rin i-pass. Except, of course, pag export enterprises naman, na sila naman yung may VAT exemption and VAT zero rating incentive. However, since I think yung tanong ni Mr. Eric Dural is more on the administrative matter on passing VAT, it's more properly directed to the BIR.
Thank you po, Attorney Brandon. We hope nasagot.
Mr. Eric Dural.
Thank you po. We hope nasagot po ang question ni Mr. Eric Dural. For our next question naman po, Attorney, from Consumer Online po, how can the CREATE law generate additional job opportunities for the Filipino workforce? Any answer po, Attorney?
Yes po. Additional if we grant fiscal incentives, we also make enterprises commit to certain performance commitments. So normally, commitments include the employment generation na kailangan nilang or the employees na kailangan, number of employees na kailangan nilang i-hire for the time na nag-avail sila ng incentives. Pag hindi nila na-commit yung number of employment na pre-namis nila or tinamit nila, pwede nating alisin yung tax incentive. So that's one way of generating employment. So also, again, employment generation through performance commitments na hinahataw dun sa enterprises. So we have to see talaga na every incentive that is granted to an enterprise, we see na the Philippines is getting its money's worth.
The tax. This is different from zero-rated companies. Yung mga food in its natural state, yung isda, yung fruits, yung vegetable, zero ang VAT nila. This is what zero VAT means. Hindi yung wag mong ire-record yung wag mong ire-record yung mga value added tax na nasa resibo mo. It pertains to the business. But you mentioned na wala na yon. Wala na ang zero-rated companies. It's either you are an exporter, which is VAT exempt, or you are subjected to value-added tax. Of course, there are companies na hindi subjected to value-added tax. Percentage tax lang yon. So I'd like to be enlightened. Does the CREATE law now is saying wala na yung zero-rated companies?
If I may, yung sinasabi ko po kanina is only as regards enterprises which are availing of tax incentives. So meron pa rin po yung mga tax incentive, yung mga zero-rated products and zero-rated enterprises under the tax code. Meron pa rin po siya.
Yeah.
However, for the for enterprises that are availing of tax incentives, meron po kasi because of the cross-border doctrine na naging ineffective, and because of the enterprises which are availing of the special corporate income tax or the 5% gross income tax, medyo doon po medyo nagiging complex na yung VAT zero rating for their purchases and their sales po. However, for the yung mga yung mga nandun sa tax code na VAT zero rating, yung mga list and those
Yes.
VAT exempt transactions, meron pa rin po sila.
Meron pa rin yan. Okay.
For regular corporations po, yun pa rin po ang gagamitan.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ma'am Tessie.
Thank you.
Thank you po again, Ms. Tessie, for sharing your thoughts and comments po. Thank you rin po sa answer, Ms. Attorney Brandon. For our next question naman po, may mechanism po ba tayo to monitor if nag-increase nga ang investment appeal natin due to this set of corporate and tax reform?
Investment, tama po ba? I
Yes,
think
po.
that's more properly aimed sa NEDA. However, nag-avail ng incentives to the trade.
Thank you, Attorney Brandon, for answering that question.
And supplement ko lang, yun din siguro ang one of the objectives of the required submissions, yung sinabi natin kanina na ATIR and ABR, is for us to also evaluate whether there has been an increase in incentives and whether the incentives are exposing or risking the government or the Philippines adversely, or kung maganda ba ang effect nito.
Thank you again, Attorney Brandon. For our next question po from online, how does the government intend to monitor the taxation system and levy tax for online sellers, bloggers, and other online professionals who earn income?
Thank you for the question. However, I think it's more properly directed to the BIR since it's concerning assessment and collection. But I think the BIR is also already provided rules for the assessment and collection of taxes for online sellers.
Thank you again, Attorney Brandon, for answering that question. And next question po from Consumer Online again. What is the turnaround time in filing application for the grant of tax incentives?
Thank you for the question. So the turnaround time will actually depend on the IPAs and the FIR and the IPAs monitoring or accept or IPAs that will register your tax incentives. Most of the time po, yung pinakita sa amin dati na timetable nila is more or less 30 plus working days. It is for projects which have investment capital of 1 billion or less. However, for projects after ma-evaluate ng IPA, ipapasa nila sa FIRB, and the FIRB will be the one to decide on whether it will grant or deny the tax incentives. So if more than 1 billion, most of the time mas matagal pa siya kaysa sa 30-day turnaround na 30 working day turnaround. So minsan po kasi ito po kasi mahirap magsabi ng exact time.
Yes.
Since meron talaga tayong minsan depende sa schedule of those board of directors who will evaluate the projects. However, we see to it that when a project is wants to be registered and wants to avail of tax incentives, we see to it na mabilisan lang dapat.
Thank you po, Attorney Brandon.
I think Attorney Michael Ricazo wants to add to the...
Okay po, yung po, Attorney.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Diana. Actually, yung application, yung evaluation process will really depend initially on the submission of complete documents and requirements by yung applicant for tax incentives. So kung let's say yung requirements na sinubmit po ninyo hindi naman po kumpleto or kulang, so minsan nagtatagal po doon. Pero let's say kumpleto na po yung sinubmit nyo na requirements or information or documents doon sa desired investment promotion agency ninyo, I think mabilis na po yan kasi meron po tayong yung SMART rules po natin merong 20 working days requests. Itong application po kasi for tax incentives can be considered as highly technical. Yung 20 working days na yan under ARTA rules, pwede pang ma-extend yun for another 20 working days. Pero in practice po, from IPA, let's say, in-endorse na po nila sa FIRB, kasi investment capital exceeds 1 billion pesos. Pagdating na po dito sa FIRB Secretariat, nako-comply naman po natin yun. More or less, yung 1 month, matagal na po yun from the time na na-receive po natin yung endorsement from the Investment Promotion Agency. So, usually within 1 month, inaano na po yan, tinatakal na po yan ng FIRB Technical Committee and eventually yung board. So, nako-comply naman po natin yung rules on ARTA for requests or applications for tax incentives. Thank you.
Thank you po, Attorney Recasa, for answering that question po. For our next question naman po, from our participants here in Zoom, is the BIR online filing already modified to reflect the tax rates in the CREATE law? Because in online filing, the tax rates appear to be the old rates. Any answer po?
Hello, good morning po. The BIR is well aware of the the new tax rates. However, you said that the online filing for tax rates appears to be the old rates. We will take note of this and we will we will take note of this and we will message na lang BIR regarding this one. So thank you po for stating that the online filing for tax rates is still the old rates.
Thank you po, Attorney Brandon. For our next question naman po, to Consumer Online, from Consumer Online. In average, how many businesses or companies apply for the grant of tax incentives every year? Follow up to this, how much is the estimated total granted tax incentives since the implementation of CREATE?
Good morning po. Thank you for the question. Pero I don't have the exact numbers po kasi for enterprises po na hindi ko po masabi kung ilan talaga sa lahat sa 14 IPAs. However, even the total investment capital, even the total investment na pumasok na. However, on the part of the FIRB, marami na po nag-apply na projects worth more than 1 billion investment capital niya since the advent of the CREATE Act.
Thank you po again for that information, Mr.
Sorry po, wala yung exact number pero I think if you want to get the exact number, you can also contact the concerned IPA or investment promotion agency. Baka sila po may bigay nila yung exact number for enterprises na nag-register sa kanila.
Thank you, Attorney Brandon, for the information po. For our next question, how will the CREATE Act impact individual taxpayers?
So hello po, individual taxpayers po. Sabi natin dito sa CREATE Act is we give tax incentives to, first of all, the corporate income tax nga na na-amend dati. Again, that's for corporations lang. However, for tax incentives, individuals can also register their business as long as meron nga siya sa FIPP. So dito kasi sa registered business enterprise as defined under Section 293M of the tax code specifically includes individuals, partnerships, corporations, Philippine branch of a foreign corporation. So this hindi na po dinidiscount yung mga sole proprietors and the like. So even basta meron pa kayong project or activity na included in the SIPP and pwede ma-register po, pwede po kayong bigyan ng tax incentives. However, for individual tax rates, in general hindi po naapektuhan ng trade. Maapektuhan kapag pag may yung individual na yun ay mayroong tax incentives such as income tax holiday or SEIP or enhanced deductions and the like.
Thank you po, Attorney Brandon. Time check lang po tayo. It's already 11:43 a.m. We apologize that we can only accommodate few questions because of our limited time. We encouraging again everyone to send in your question here in chat box. May na-receive po ulit tayong question from Miss Tessie Ladangan po ulit. Sir, have you been successful in incentivizing companies to transfer to outside Metro Manila due to CREATE?
Yes po, meron na po tayong projects, even those more than 1 billion yung dumaan na po sa FIRB. Madami na po locate in other areas in order to maximize yung tax incentives regime nga natin. And sabi nga natin, the farther you are away from the national capital region, the longer the period of tax incentives. So meron na po mga even projects with more than 1 billion, meron ng mga nag-maximize ng provision na yun.
Thank you again, Attorney Brandon, for answering that question. From DA Admin SBCs, yung mga single prop na gusto mag-avail ng SCIT, pwede mag-register as one-person corporation po?
Yes po, no prohibition under the CREATE Act, just as long as you are classified as an exporter in order to avail of the SCIT. So yun nga, sabi natin, you have to first, your project or activity must be qualified under the SIPP, and you are classified as an export-oriented business enterprise. So it's either you become a direct exporter or you become an indirect exporter. So yun na po, pwede siyang mag-avail ng SCIP. So regardless kung ano pang type of corporation yan, single proprietor or individual, or regardless kung partnership or corporation.
Thank you po again, Attorney Brandon. Last two questions na lang po. For our next question po, what are the potential drawbacks or negative implication of the CREATE Act? How does the DOF plan to address these risks or issues?
So one of the potential drawbacks kasi in granting tax incentives is the government is exposed to tax leakages or not getting its money's worth in granting tax incentives. So the CREATE Act, in addressing this, stated that if you are given or if you are provided tax incentives, dapat meron ka rin performance commitments na dapat i-achieve. So one example, yung sabi natin kanina, one of the performance commitments is the generation of a number of employees. So for example, a manufacturing plant, in order to be provided income tax holiday or any of the incentives under the CREATE Act, sasabihin natin, bibigyan ka namin ng tax incentives basta mag-generate ka ng 100 employees. Ganun po. So we see that meron siyang peso per peso equivalent para hindi nalulugi yung pagbigay, hindi nalulugi ang Philippines sa pagbigay ng tax incentives. So yun po, one example, again, that's an example of a performance commitment, and pwede po magdagdag pa IPA or FIRB, depende sa type of incentive or depende sa type of project na ipuput up ng isang tao. May dadagdag po si Attorney Michael Legasa.
Yes, you may po, Attorney.
Thank you, Attorney Brandon. The CREATE Act is we have to remember always yung CREATE Act. It was enacted during the height of the pandemic. So first and foremost, talagang siya, economic recovery measure siya. Aside from the fact na we're trying to compete globally in terms of corporate tax rates, but more than anything, it was a corporate economic recovery measure para at least matulungan yung mga natin, yung mga enterprises natin alam naman natin during the height of the pandemic or because of the pandemic, marami pong nawalan ng trabaho, marami pong nawalan ng negosyo, ng hanap buhay. The CREATE Act, we admit, it's not perfect. At times, it can be harsh. For example, last year, naging malaking issue po yung work from home. Kung hindi naman po siguro kaila sa atin, no? Dahil meron pong provision sa tax code na brought about din ng CREATE Act na pinoprohibit natin yung mga enterprises from conducting their activities outside the zones where they are registered. But then, in spite of that, yung FIRB naman is always conscious then of the needs of the people and of the business sectors natin, no? So for instance, yung sa work from home issue na yon, although merong prohibition sa tax code, nagawa naman po ng paraan ng FIRB, nagawa ng kahit papano ng solution doon sa work from home issue na yon. So inallow natin yung mga BPO companies natin na registered, let's say, with PEZA, na to transfer the registration sa Board of Investments kasi hindi po sila sakop itong Board of Investments po kasi hindi sakop nung provision na yon sa tax code. So we admit the law may not be perfect, but rest assured yung FIRB po and the Department of Finance are constantly trying to look for ways to fill in those gaps as reasonably and as properly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you po, Attorney Recasa, for that answer. For our last question naman po, how does the CREATE Act balance the need for businesses to grow and compete with the need for the government to generate revenue and provide public services?
So thank you po for the question. So again po, yun po, under the CREATE Act, hindi lang po tayo nagbibigay ng tax incentives na without na walang kapalit. So meron po tayong performance commitments or meron tayong sinasabi natin conditions in order to avail of the tax incentives. So ito pong mga enterprises
Hello?
Hello po. We're sorry po.
Hello?
Technical difficulties. Si Attorney
Hello po.
Brandon. Hello po.
Tap. So again, going back to the questions, to the question po. So we have to remember again that unlike prior to the CREATE Act, ngayon po, if we grant tax incentives, meron po tayong binibigay na performance commitments in order for the enterprise to avail of tax incentives. Sabi natin kanina, one example is the employment generation. Pwede pa tayo magdagdag, depende sa IPAs or the FIRB, and depende rin sa type of project or activity. So yun, other examples include tataasan natin yung export requirement. Other examples include yung kung kailan ka dapat mag-start ng commercial operations and the like. So we see na meron talagang peso for peso equivalent sa mga binibigay nating incentives.
Thank you po, Attorney Brandon, for answering our last question. Maraming salamat po sa mga nagtanong at mga nagtatanong pa po. Before we close this session po, may we ask Attorney Brandon to give a short message to our have other queries and concerns. Any message po, Attorney Brandon?
So hello po. Good. Again, thank you for inviting me po dito sa DTI Consumer Cares webinar po. I hope you learned from the presentation po and ma-remember nyo rin po yung mga sinabi ko kanina. So if you have any other questions or kailangan nyo pa ng clarifications or may questions kayo na hindi na sagot or natanong dito sa webinar series, you may always send an email po dun sa FIRB at firbsecretariat at ntrc.gov.ph. Can I request na lang Ms. Diana answer any question that you may have and clarify any other questions that you may think of after this presentation.
Attorney Recasa to give a short message for our participants. Attorney Recasa.
Hello. Wala daw po siyang short message.
Thank you so much po. Thank you po again to our speaker and panelists, Attorney Brandon Berad and Attorney Michael Recasa. We also acknowledge the presence of Attorney Criseden Aro. Thank you po, Attorney, for joining us today. This is to formally close our webinar for today. Muli, maraming salamat sa ating very capable speaker from the DOF Fiscal Incentives Review Board, Attorney Brandon Berad, and to Attorney Michael Recasa at mula sa Consumer Protection Group. Maraming salamat po sa ating mga participants na nakasama natin ngayong umaga. Huwag po ninyong kalimutang samahan kami muli sa mga susunod pa pong webinars. Our announcement will be posted in our social media accounts. For more updates, please like, follow, subscribe to our Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube account. DTI Consumer Care, DTI 1384, and DTI Philippines. Mag-subscribe din po kayo sa DTI 1384 text messaging upang makatanggap po tayo ng mga updates at kaganapan ng DTI Consumer Protection Group. Also, kindly accomplish po and submit the survey form para makakuha din po tayo ng link at ma-download ang presentation na ginamit ngayong umaga. Thank you so much everyone and stay safe.
Para sa ating mamamayang Pilipino, para iwas daya dapat wais at alisto. Mainam maging mapagmatsyag at mapanuri tayo. Palakasin ang boses ng ating mga konsumer. Dapat tama bawat presyo at serbisyo. Produktong pasado lalo ang mga pangunahing bilihin. Ang kalidad ng mga produkto at serbisyo ay pangalagaan ng lahat, tayo ay panalo. Layunin ng DTI ito.
Ipatupad Price Act 7581, Consumer Act 7394, Product Standards 4109, for Consumer Care at iba pa, tayang 1384.
Ipalaganap karapatan at tungkulin, kaalamang tama sa consumer ibahagi. Tulay sa kaunlaran, kalakalan ay palakasin. Ito ang pagbabago para sa ikabubuti natin. Dapat tapat bawat presyo at serbisyo. Produktong pasado lalo ang mga pangunahing bilihin. Ang kalidad ng mga produkto at serbisyo ay pangalagaan ng lahat, tayo ay panalo. Layunin ng DTI ito.
Ipatupad Price Act 7581, Consumer Act 7394, Product Standards 4109, for Consumer Care at iba pa, tayang 1384.
Dapat tama, dapat tapat, mula sa DTI ito.